In Lusanga, a quiet town in East Africa, Cato the plumber went to Clint Okoro's mansion for what seemed like a normal job. Clint was one of the richest men in the region, and fixing a pipe in his backyard felt like just another day's work. Cato dug into the soil with his spade, expecting only mud and stone, when suddenly his tool struck something hard. At first, he thought it might be metal. But when he brushed the dirt away, his heart raced. It was glass, a large bottle, sealed so tightly that no air could escape. The glass was dark green, foggy, but not empty. Cato froze. Inside, something shifted. He leaned closer, and his blood ran cold. A face pressed against the glass, a man's face, eyes bulging, mouth wide as if screaming, yet no sound came out. Cato stumbled back, blinking, wondering if his eyes were playing tricks. But the face remained, moving slightly, watching him. Sweat rolled down his neck. He called out to Clint, who only laughed at the story, waving it away as a plumber's fantasy. "Just dirt in the bottle," Clint said, but Cato could not look away. The face blinked. The eyes begged. Cato felt his chest tighten as if the bottle itself whispered for help. The gardener nearby muttered nervously and refused to touch it. The air grew heavy, the ground colder. Cato knew this was no ordinary object. What had begun as a simple repair was about to change his life forever. Clint threw his head back and laughed when Cato told him what he had seen inside the strange green bottle. A face? "My friend, you've been working under the sun too long," Clint mocked, sipping his cold drink without a care. But Cato's eyes stayed on the bottle. He wasn't joking. He could feel something alive inside it. The gardener, an old man who had worked for the Okoro family for decades, muttered under his breath and crossed himself. "Leave it where it is," he warned softly. "Some things buried should stay buried." His words made Cato's skin crawl, but Clint only scoffed. "Nonsense," Clint said. "Pull it out. I want to see it." With hesitation, Cato and two other workers dragged the heavy bottle from the soil. It was larger than any bottle Cato had ever seen, almost the size of a small barrel, and sealed with a dark, crusted stopper that looked like it hadn't been touched in centuries. As the dirt fell away, strange carvings became clear on the glass. Symbols, patterns, and tribal markings that seemed older than the town itself. Cato traced one with his finger, and his stomach tightened. The symbols seemed to hum faintly beneath his touch, like they were alive. He bent down, pressing his ear against the bottle. At first, there was only silence. Then, faint but chilling, came whispers. Not random sounds, but words. He couldn't make them all out, but one thing was clear, they were begging. A man's voice pleaded from inside, calling for help, calling to be freed. Cato's hands trembled as he pulled back, his face pale. "Clint, there's someone in there," he whispered. Before Clint could reply, the bottle gave a sudden jerk. Everyone froze. Then it shook again, harder, rattling against the stones of the backyard. The whispers rose into muffled cries, echoing from inside the thick glass. It was as if the prisoner inside had felt Cato listening and now fought to get out. The ground beneath the bottle vibrated with each movement, like the earth itself was afraid. The gardener dropped his tools and stumbled back, shouting, "I told you. It is cursed. Leave it." The other workers, wide-eyed with fear, didn't wait for Clint's command. They scattered, running toward the gates, not daring to look back. Only Cato and Clint stood frozen, staring at the bottle as it shook violently, as though some ancient force inside was desperate to break free. Clint's proud smile finally faltered. The bottle rolled on the ground by itself, thumping against the stones, the carvings glowing faintly as dust swirled around it. The stopper rattled as if it might burst open at any second. Cato's heart pounded so hard he could hear it in his ears. He wanted to run like the others, but his feet refused to move. Something about the bottle pulled him in, like it was calling him, like it had been waiting for him all along. That night, Cato could not sleep. He tossed on his small bed, his mind replaying the bottle's violent shaking and the muffled cries he had heard. The image of that desperate face behind the glass haunted him even with his eyes closed. Finally, when he drifted into a heavy sleep, he found himself standing in a strange place. The air was dark, the ground covered with ash, and in front of him was the same man from the bottle. His eyes glowed faintly, his skin marked with scars that seemed to burn like fire. His lips moved slowly, whispering a name. "Mwamba," he said, his voice low and heavy, like the weight of thunder. Cato shivered. Mwamba stepped closer, and though his body looked strong and unbroken, chains of light bound his arms and legs. "I was a warrior," he said, his voice echoing inside Cato's mind. "I swore to protect my people, but I broke the oath. For that betrayal, the elders cursed me, locking me inside this prison for eternity." His words carried sorrow but also anger, as though centuries of pain burned inside him. Cato wanted to turn away, but he couldn't. The man's gaze held him like iron. Then Mwamba's tone grew bitter. "Clint's family," he said. "It was his grandfather who found me. He went to a shrine forbidden to outsiders. He knew the power I carried, the curse that bound me. He stole the bottle, took me from the place I was meant to remain. And with my suffering, his family rose." Images filled Cato's dream, a man in old clothes digging the bottle from sacred ground, carrying it back to a small hut, then suddenly wealth pouring into his life, gold, land, power. Each time the family gained more, Mwamba's chains grew tighter, his body bending under the weight. Cato felt sick watching it. He understood now that Clint's riches were no accident. Every coin, every piece of land, every mansion was built on Mwamba's endless torment. The empire of the Okoro family was not from hard work but from stolen power, stolen pain. Mwamba's eyes glowed brighter as he said, "I have watched them feast while I rot. I have watched them rise while I am buried alive. Decades pass, and still I remain." His voice cracked into a growl, and the dream around Cato shook as if the earth itself trembled. Cato fell to his knees, his hands over his ears, but he could not block the sound. Mwamba leaned closer, whispering in a voice that chilled Cato to the bone. "You, Cato, you touched the bottle. You heard me. That means you can free me." The chains rattled louder, pulling him back into the shadows. "Free me, plumber. Free me, and I will show the truth of their greed." Cato gasped awake, his shirt soaked with sweat, his chest pounding. The room was silent, but his ears still rang with Mwamba's voice. He knew it was not just a dream. The man in the bottle had spoken, and now he was waiting. The morning after the dream, Cato could not shake the heavy truth pressing on his chest. As he walked through the busy streets of Lusanga, the words of Mwamba echoed in his ears. He looked at Clint's grand mansion on the hill, its tall gates, polished cars, and guards in neat uniforms, and he finally understood. None of it was earned. None of it came from sweat or honest work. Every brick of that mansion, every coin in Clint's bank, came from the suffering of the man trapped inside that bottle. The curse was the true foundation of the Okoro family's empire. Each year they grew richer, Mwamba's prison grew tighter, his pain feeding their fortune. Cato's stomach twisted with anger and shame. How could one family build their lives on another man's eternal torment? That afternoon, Cato returned to Clint's backyard to finish the job he had been hired for, but his eyes kept drifting to where the bottle had been hidden. He found Clint standing proudly by the fountain, speaking to a group of businessmen. When the men left, Clint noticed Cato staring. With a sly grin, Clint walked over. "You are thinking about the bottle, aren't you?" His voice was sharp, but almost playful. Cato swallowed hard. "It should not belong to anyone," he said softly. Clint's eyes flashed with sudden anger. "It belongs to me. It has always belonged to my family. Without it, we would have nothing." His words spilled out like a confession, and Cato realized Clint was not even ashamed. Clint leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Do you think I care how it works? Do you think I care about the man inside? That bottle is the reason I live like a king, while you fix broken pipes for scraps. This world does not reward kindness, Cato. It rewards power. His tone was sharp, his smile cruel. For the first time, Cato saw the desperation behind Clint's pride. It wasn't just greed, it was fear. Clint clung to the bottle because he knew, deep inside, that without it he was ordinary. The gardener, who had been listening quietly from the shadows, shook his head. Master Clint, he said softly, you cannot keep a curse forever. One day, it will eat everything you have. Clint snapped at him, silence, old man. You think I will give up the very thing that made us who we are? He turned back to Cato, his voice dropping into a growl. Understand this, that bottle is mine. And if you ever try to touch it again, you will regret it. Cato stood frozen, his heart pounding, but inside he felt a fire growing. The arrogance in Clint's voice only confirmed the truth Mwamba had shown him. The wealth, the empire, the power, it was nothing but stolen fortune tied to a man's endless suffering. And now, Cato knew he had to make a choice. He could stay silent like everyone else, or he could risk everything to break the curse. That night, Cato went to the elders of Lusanga. They listened in silence as he told them about the bottle, about the face inside, and about the dream where Mwamba spoke to him. The oldest among them, his voice trembling with age, finally said, "We know this curse. It was buried long ago so that no one would dare touch it. But greed has no respect for warnings." Another elder leaned forward, her eyes sharp. "There is only one way to break it. The bottle must be smashed at sunrise on the sacred hill. Only then will the chains release." The room grew quiet, the firelight flickering against their worried faces. "But beware," she added. "A man caged for centuries does not come out gentle. His anger may burn the world that forgot him." Cato felt a chill run through his body. Freeing Mwamba could save the town from Clint's grip, but it could also unleash a storm no one could control. As he walked home under the night sky, the weight of that choice pressed down on him harder than any pipe or tool he had ever carried. When he reached his small house, he found Clint waiting at his door, dressed in a fine suit, a glass of wine in his hand. His smile was thin, his eyes cold. "I hear you've been speaking with the old fools," Clint said smoothly. "Let me make this simple. Stay out of my business, or I will crush you and your family. One word from me, and you will lose everything. Your wife, your children, they will starve while I watch." Cato's fists tightened, but fear coiled in his stomach. Clint's threats were not empty. Everyone knew he had the power to destroy lives with a snap of his fingers. Cato lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, torn apart inside. He thought of his family sleeping in the next room, innocent and unaware of the storm about to fall. He thought of Mwamba, his glowing eyes full of rage and sorrow, begging to be freed. He thought of the elders' warning that freedom might not mean mercy. By midnight, his body shook with the weight of the decision. If he stayed silent, Clint's empire would grow stronger, and the curse would continue, binding Mwamba in endless suffering. But if he acted, he might free a monster who could destroy them all. Every choice seemed like death. He sat by the window, watching the stars fade as night stretched toward dawn. The sacred hill waited in the distance, dark against the sky. The bottle sat hidden under his bed, pulsing faintly as though alive, as though it could feel his fear. Cato whispered to himself, "Do I save my family now, or do I save my people forever?" His voice cracked, but deep inside, he knew the answer was coming with the sun. The sky was still dark when Cato tied the bottle in an old cloth and slipped out of his house. Every step toward the sacred hill felt heavier than the last. The bottle throbbed in his hands like a living heart, whispering faint sounds that made his skin crawl. He kept glancing over his shoulder, knowing Clint would not let him go so easily. Sure enough, before he reached the hilltop, headlights cut across the dirt road. Black trucks roared closer, filled with Clint's armed guards. Clint himself stood in the back of one, his face twisted with rage. "Stop him," he shouted, his voice carrying across the silent land. Cato ran, his legs burning as he clutched the bottle. The hill rose steeply ahead, glowing faintly as the first edge of sunrise touched the horizon. Bullets cracked through the air, but Cato did not stop. His breath came in ragged gasps as he stumbled up the sacred path, every heartbeat echoing louder in his ears. Clint's men were closing in when the first rays of sunlight broke free, spilling gold across the stones of the hill. Cato lifted the bottle high above his head, his arms shaking from fear and weight. Then, with all his strength, he slammed it against the sacred rock. The sound was like the world itself tearing open. The glass exploded into shards that burned like fire as they scattered across the ground. A scream erupted, not human, not animal, but something that shook the sky. The earth split beneath Cato's feet as a figure rose from the cloud of dust and glowing fragments. Mwamba stood tall, his body whole, his skin covered with glowing scars that pulsed like living fire. His first breath was so deep and powerful that the ground quaked and the trees bent as though bowing to him. Cato fell back, shielding his eyes from the blinding light around the warrior. Clint stumbled up the hill with his guards, but when he saw Mwamba, his bravado shattered. He dropped to his knees, his hands shaking. "Please, please, I beg you," Clint cried, his voice trembling. The guards who had followed him threw down their weapons and ran, too terrified to look back. Mwamba turned slowly, his glowing eyes fixing on Clint. Each step he took left a faint scorch on the earth, the air buzzing with his power. Cato could barely breathe. He had freed the man from the bottle, but now he understood the elder's warning. This was not a gentle soul. This was a storm, centuries of fury and pain shaped into flesh. Clint bent forward, pressing his face to the dirt, sobbing, "Mercy. Mercy, please." Mwamba stopped just inches from him, silent, his scars glowing brighter with every heartbeat. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for his judgment. The hilltop was silent except for Clint's desperate sobs. He lay trembling in the dirt, his fine suit torn, his face wet with tears. Mwamba stood over him, his scars glowing like molten fire, his eyes sharp with centuries of rage. Cato's chest tightened as he waited for the warrior to strike, certain he would see Clint's life end in one blow. But Mwamba did not raise his hand. Instead, he spoke a single word in a voice so deep it shook the earth. The sound rolled through the air like thunder, carrying a power beyond human. Clint gasped as his gold watch slipped from his wrist and melted into dust. Down in the town, the banks cracked open, coins spilling into the streets. Mansions lost their walls, jewels turned to stones, cars rusted in seconds, and vaults emptied into the hands of the poor. The Okoro family's fortune, built on stolen pain, collapsed in a single moment. The people of Lusanga looked on in shock as their farms bloomed, their debts vanished, and wealth poured back into their hands. Children who had gone hungry found baskets of food appearing at their doors. Water flowed fresh again in wells that had long dried. Everywhere, balance was being restored, as if the land itself was breathing for the first time in generations. Clint clawed at the ground, screaming as he felt everything slip away. His voice cracked with terror. "No. Please, it is mine. It is all mine." But his words were swallowed by the sound of the earth groaning as the curse unraveled. Mwamba looked down at him with no pity. "You fed your empire with my suffering. Now your empire is dust." Clint's body seemed smaller, weaker, as though the power had been drained from his very soul. He slumped to the ground, broken not by death but by loss. Then Mwamba turned to Cato. His glowing eyes softened, though the power around him still trembled in the air. Cato's heart pounded as he stepped back, unsure if he was next. Mwamba's voice lowered. "You freed me. Now I choose your fate." Cato swallowed hard, bracing himself for wrath, but to his shock, Mwamba lifted his hand in blessing. The fiery scars on his body pulsed once, and a warmth spread through Cato like sunlight filling his chest. Your courage broke the chain of greed, Mwamba said. Because of you, the curse has returned home. From this day, your bloodline will walk under my protection. No shadow of greed will touch your family. Where others fall, you will stand. Cato's eyes widened, tears stinging them as the weight of those words sank in. He had expected destruction, maybe even his own death, but instead he was given a gift greater than wealth. The hill glowed brighter for a moment, then dimmed as Mwamba's form began to fade into the air like smoke returning to the sky. Cato stood alone, clutching his chest where the warmth remained, while Clint lay sobbing in the dirt with nothing left. The curse was broken, but its memory would live forever. Word of what happened on the sacred hill spread faster than fire in dry grass. By evening, every radio station, every newspaper, and every whisper in the market carried the same story: a bottle that held a man for centuries had been broken, and with it, the empire of the Okoro family had crumbled. Some called it a miracle of justice. Others feared it was a curse too great to speak of. Across Africa, people debated in buses, in churches, and in schools. Was wealth ever truly clean? How many fortunes were built on suffering hidden away? Cato, the quiet plumber who once worried only about leaky pipes, suddenly became a name known far beyond Lusanga. Strangers came to his door, some to thank him, others to beg for his protection, believing he now carried a blessing greater than gold. Children followed him in the street, whispering his name like he was a hero from an old tale. Cato himself stayed humble, still unsure if he had saved the world or only unleashed a truth too heavy to bear. Clint, the once proud billionaire, disappeared from sight. His mansion stood empty, his businesses collapsed overnight, and his name became a warning rather than a legacy. No one envied him anymore. He was a man stripped bare, remembered not for wealth but for greed. And the place where the bottle had first been found changed too. By morning, the ground burst with tall trees, their roots twisting deep, their branches rising high, as if guarding the secret buried there. People swore they saw shadows moving between the trunks at night, unseen hands keeping watch. And one question hung in the air like a ghost: if one bottle was found, how many more still slept beneath the earth, waiting?